When grandparents who are nationals of another country want to visit their American grandchildren, consular affairs officers interview them at posts abroad and process their visa applications. When American citizens like Brittany Griner are detained or arrested unjustly abroad, consular officers are often the first to visit them in prison. And when my constituents in New Jersey and those of every member of this committee need to renew their passports, consular affairs officers process their applications. So, Assistant Secretary Bitter, while I know your team probably gets more angry phone calls than any other Foreign Service officer, I want to start by saying we do appreciate the work that you and all of those who work with you do, often under incredibly demanding circumstances. For better or for worse, many Americans' only interaction with the State Department is getting or renewing a passport, leading to some of those frustrating phone calls. I don't need to tell you that the current backlog has people waiting upwards of 3 months for their passports, not even including shipping time. In March, Secretary Blinken said you were getting close to 500,000 passport applications a week, putting you on track to beat last year's records of processing almost 22 million passports. Even so, my office has been inundated with calls from constituents concerned about receiving their passports before they travel. Last week, we had nearly 50 open cases helping constituents get their passports. Whether it's a last-minute family emergency or their first international trip since COVID restrictions were lifted, Americans should not be experiencing such extended wait times, especially during the busy summer travel season. So I applaud Secretary Blinken's decision to establish a task force to speed up wait times. I know that the department is hiring more staff, and I know the staff you do have are working overtime, but we need to find out what else we can do to help you achieve the goal we all want. What are we doing to improve the online passport renewal initiative? I'd also like to hear about your work processing visas. Consular officers, affairs officers in embassies overseas are the sole people responsible for conducting visa interviews. Very often, I'm told by individuals, well, the ambassador said, no, the consular officer has the final say on what visas are. Not only are they often overloaded and work long hours, their work is sometimes literally life and death. Take the recent success story, Asima Barakci, an Afghan woman whose son served as a combat interpreter helping U.S. Special Forces hunt down the Taliban. Following the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan, she and her family were targeted by the new government. They left notices at her abandoned home and questioned her neighbors. For 2 years, my office worked with Consular Affairs to help Seema and her family reach the United States, as promised. Thankfully, just last week, she finally touched down in San Francisco after a tumultuous departure from Pakistan. And there are many more stories, some heroic and some more mundane. Airlifting someone for medical relief, getting a grandmother to her grandchild's baptism or bris, and some more practical. Helping American businesses get their employees they need for success, whether hiring for Maurice Piers in New Jersey or a data engineer assisting a new startup. Making sure international students get visas to attend American universities in a timely manner. Because in addition to the billions of dollars these students bring to our communities, they also enrich the fabric of our nation. I know you've been under strain, and I want to hear what, if any, additional resources or assistance you need to continue to provide these vital services. We have to ensure that the United States remains the top destination for the world's smartest brains and hardest workers. And we need to make sure we keep our nation's promises not only to those who serve with our soldiers and in our diplomatic officers, but to those wrongfully detained Americans who deserve regular consular access. Putin's government has twice now refused consular access to Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. That is simply unacceptable. And Assistant Secretary Bitter, I urge you and the State Department to keep pushing Moscow on this point. I will just close. I often get calls on a Thursday that says, I just looked at my passport and I need to travel to a wedding on Sunday. And I said, well, I'm not Houdini. So we try to help, and your New York office, by the way, is incredibly tremendous work effort that they have and very helpful. But we actually held a press conference, a workshop, look before you leave, so that people look at their passports well before they are thinking of traveling and find out whether or not they are in need of a new passport, because you need, not only does it have to be still valid, but it has to be valid for at least 6 months beyond. So most people don't know that, and so we work all the time trying to make that case back at home. So I appreciate the work that you do. We just want to see how we make it all do better. A better sense of all the good the Consular Affairs does for the country is part of what I hope the hearing to be, but also to determine how we can do better. With that, let me turn to the distinguished ranking member.